The anime begins with a young man named Ryo waking up to find 2 books and a knife on a table in front of him. He leaves his home and starts exploring his new power, water manipulation. Suddenly, he's transported to an unknown place and bewilderedly asks himself, "Where am I? Really?" An angel then appears and asks if he's Ryo. When he confirms it, the angel happily tells him no visitors have come for a long time, and he's glad for this meeting. The angel reveals the painful truth. Ryo died in an accident. Ryo remembers the accident and realizes the angel is telling the truth, but Ryo tells him he knows he'll come back to life, but doesn't know what he'll do. The angel gently tells him to do whatever he pleases since he has no mission assigned to him. Ryo is surprised by this, then thinks for a few seconds and tells him he wants to live a quiet life. The angel explains that he'll return to a magic-filled world called Fae, where 20% of humans possess magic skills. He tells Ryo he has water element magic because it suits him, and since he wanted a quiet life, the angel will return him to Rondo Forest. The angel points out there's food inside a small house, enough to last him for 2 months. Ryo is surprised the food is frozen inside an ice house, but the angel explains he intended this as a protective barrier to keep monsters away from the food. In his new home, Ryo starts reading books about monsters and learning about them. He's surprised they're in a strange language, but he can read them easily. He heads outside and begins training his water element power. He believes his power can manifest by simply imagining it, with no need to speak. He returns inside and starts filling a basin with water, but the water is room temperature. He wishes the water was hot so he could have a warm bath. He goes outside and gathers some wood to make a fire, but he fails and feels extremely exhausted from the great effort. He lies down on the ground and starts thinking again. He grabs a bowl of water and tries to freeze it, but he fails at that too. He thinks it's difficult and he needs to figure out how to make ice. He also wishes he could cast and use an ice spear spell. He focuses on compressing the water to remove its heat and visualizes the water molecules, wondering if he can bind oxygen with hydrogen. He finally succeeds in freezing the water due to hydrogen bonds and realizes he can make it take any shape he wants. After that, he uses it to light the wood on fire, which fills him with immense joy. He goes back inside and takes a warm bath as he wished, feeling incredibly comfortable. His first day was productive, and he feels he can produce warm water the same way. He thinks magic is very useful. The next day, he starts eating the food the angel prepared for him. Ryo remembers the food will only last him for 2 months, and he thinks he needs to go hunting before it runs out. He realizes this forest is outside the barrier, so there will be many monsters. His knife won't be enough for hunting. He'll also need offensive magic. It's better for him to start training to live a quiet and safe life. He heads outside and starts training again. He casts a water ball, which excites him because it's his first successful offensive spell, but it doesn't have full offensive power. He expects this is logical, but he doesn't despair, and he has some tricks up his sleeve too. He sees the water ball he cast wasn't enough, so he decides to use a water jet, thinking it will do the trick. He narrows the opening to create a fast stream, but when the stream comes out, it doesn't reach the tree, resulting in a weak hit that makes him feel let down. He goes back to the angel again, and asks him how to use magic correctly. The angel tells him that the basis of magic is imagination, and he needs to have a clear idea of what he aims to do, and then he'll gain experience over time. Ryo returns to the forest again and uses his magic as the angel told him, noticing a significant improvement. He goes inside his home and successfully fills the water basin with warm water by using the reverse of the ice spell. The next day, he starts training to create ice from thin air and succeeds, though it was very slow, but now it's possible for him. This led to his goal of offensive ice magic. He produces an ice spear, but he can't launch it very far. He finds launching it isn't as easy as launching water, but he chooses to train on it until he masters it, just like he mastered launching water balls. He tries to launch ice arrows again, but he fails after a great effort, and he feels like he'll pass out from losing too much of his magical mana. He heads inside his home and wants to light a fire, but he can't because there's no sun like before, which presents him with a new challenge to solve. The next day, he started training again on ice arrows, and after several days passed, he succeeded in forming an ice arrow, but couldn't launch it properly. However, he made a spear and went on an adventure. Then he moved to the forest outside the barrier, where there were also traces of large monsters. But he approached the river and found a flint stone on the fire's bank, thinking that this way he could light a fire even after sunset, and that now he just needed to collect some medicinal herbs, making today's adventure successful. Suddenly, a huge monster appeared behind him, and Ryo felt it and turned around. Ryo felt scared when he saw this monster. It was a wild boar, which froze him to the ground, unable to move from fear. Then the boar attacked him, and when it approached, Ryo remembered the incident that happened to him and moved away before being hurt by the boar. The boar attacked him again, but Ryo told himself he couldn't move, but he might be able to use his magic. Then he used ice power in the boar's path, causing it to slip to the ground, then showed ice arrows which caused the boar to crash into them, leading to its death, which relieved Ryo afterward. Then we moved to Ryo's house, where he prepared the boar's fur to use as clothing. Ryo succeeded in lighting fire in the house without needing the sun, and began reading the monster book. He read that the boar he killed was among the small wild boars and classified under the weakest ranks, and that the monster encyclopedia he was reading from was for beginners. But it mentioned that the last 2 pages were a special copy, and he read that dragons, any of them, could easily destroy an entire city, and one must flee immediately upon meeting them. Ryo saw that this seemed logical because he could face death in meeting them. Then he moved to the other monster called Akuma, which wasn't a fallen angel, and there was a note hoping they wouldn't meet one of them. Then Ryo discovered that the world was vast because of the abundance of these monsters. The next day, Ryo stripped from his clothes and moved to the forest, started picking fruit and tasting it, liking it very much while wearing his boar fur clothes. While he began wandering in the forest again, a giant bird came and almost caught him, but Ryo avoided this capture. It was a very strong bird that cut down forest trees. Then Ryo started fleeing from it and began obstructing its path using ice plates. Ryo thought this type of bird used a hidden type of magic, offensive wind, but its main weapon was its rushing and waving of sharp claws and beaks, and he couldn't escape from it. Then Ryo stopped and fired some water arrows at the bird, but the bird avoided all the strikes. When it approached Ryo, Ryo created an ice barrier to avoid being injured by the bird, causing the bird to crash into this barrier and fall to the ground. Then Ryo approached, directing his weapon toward the bird, but the bird flew quickly, thinking Ryo would kill it. While it was flying, Ryo saw a wound in the bird's eye, causing the bird to move away from Ryo's path and fly far away. Then Ryo lay on the ground and saw that the quiet life was harder than expected. Then night fell on him while he was still lost in the forest because his escape from the bird made him lose the way back to his house. Then he started moving, thinking he was on the right path, but he saw a lake with a headless body and a horse with it, which surprised Ryo. The next day, Ryo started wandering in the forest again and continued killing monsters through ice arrows and used his spear to hunt fish as well. He moved to his house and stored a supply of fish, then started training on ice plates. Then he moved to the river and dove into the river's depths and met a giant octopus, which drove him out of the river. Then he used his water power to cut stones and felt happy because he succeeded in this. He expected that if he used magic to increase the ice's hardness, he could replace grinding material, and also thought he was beginning to master his magic. Then we moved to the headless body again, and Ryo was facing it. Ryo told himself that the monster book didn't mention anything about Dullahan monsters and thought it was too advanced, so it wasn't mentioned in the beginner monster book. But he didn't care about this and attacked it, directing many strikes at it, but he didn't succeed in hitting it. However, the monster succeeded in hitting Ryo with a strike and almost finished him with the next strike, but Ryo avoided his strike and thought he got him, but the monster avoided Ryo's strike. Ryo received a strike from the monster that knocked him to the ground and felt extreme exhaustion, thinking he had no chance left. But there was a reason for coming to this place every night, and he saw that this monster wanted to tell him that it would train him until he reached the required level. Then the monster showed him a water sword, which amazed Ryo. Then it advanced to him and gave it to him, and Ryo thought it was asking him to master it well. Then Ryo received it from him while surprised, and after that the monster went away from him. Then Ryo moved to the forest again and was facing the bird again. He saw the scratch in its eye, but its color had become darker than before, and wondered if it had evolved from before. Then the bird launched wind power at Ryo, but Ryo confronted it by creating ice barriers. But Ryo was surprised by the destruction of these barriers, and started fleeing from it while confronting its strikes at the same time. The bird attacked Ryo, but Ryo created ice barriers, but the bird completely shattered them. Ryo continued creating ice barriers, and also tried using ice arrows, but they didn't hit the bird at all. The bird got rid of these ice barriers using its sound power and attacked Ryo, but Ryo avoided this attack and was amazed by the bird's evolved power. Then Ryo received a lightning attack that knocked him to the ground. Then the bird attacked Ryo and almost lifted him with its claws, but Ryo blocked this attack by using his sword. Then the bird appeared behind him again and launched wind power at him, but Ryo confronted it well. Then the bird flew high, ready to attack Ryo, and attacked him quickly, but Ryo succeeded in stabbing the bird with the sword skillfully, causing the bird to fall to the ground. Then Ryo approached it and thought it came back for revenge because he caused it a wound in its eye and it didn't accept the matter. He asked it to help him in meeting it to advance, and that he wanted to be stronger so he could return to face it again, and thanked it for making him feel better. Then he pulled part of the sword from the bird's body, and told it he knew it evolved to pay him back double, but he would finish it here and give it respect. Then the sword completely, until the bird bled and fell to the ground dead. Then a dragon appeared flying in the sky, and landed in front of Ryo in the forest, which surprised Ryo, and surprised him again when the dragon spoke to him. The dragon told him it had been a long time since using telepathy and wasn't sure it still worked, which made Ryo ask about telepathy. The dragon asked Ryo if he had met a bird that evolved after being a killer falcon in this place, and Ryo told him he had indeed met it. He asked him if it wasn't his follower, right? And told him that if it was his follower, he was sorry for killing it. The dragon understood that he had killed it and told him that was amazing work, and noticed he was carrying a rare weapon. Then Ryo showed him the weapon, and the dragon told him this weapon belonged to the king of genies, and since he gave it to him, then Ryo did something worthy of owning this weapon. But Ryo wanted to ask several questions to the dragon, and after that the dragon told Ryo he had to go. Ryo told him he knew that and appreciated everything he told him about, but before the dragon left, he asked about his name. The dragon told him he was called Lin, and flew high. Ryo never expected to talk to a dragon in his life and expected anything in a fantasy world like this. Then we moved to the angel, and he thought he overlooked something and saw that Ryo possessed a hidden ability. But he was surprised by this, because the last person who possessed this ability was a girl he sent to another world, and that was 0 years ago. But in Ryo's case, his hidden ability was eternal youth. Ryo went to the coast to get seafood and was surprised to find a terrible sight. There were 2 soldiers lying on the ground who had been attacked while sailing by a coastal monster, which led to the destruction and sinking of their ship. Ryo heard one of them sigh, which startled him. Then, we moved to Ryo's house, where one of the soldiers was taken. The soldier regained consciousness and had a very important necklace with him, important to him. He asked himself, "Where am I?" Then he went out of the house to explore the place, but Ryo appeared from behind him, which surprised the soldier because he hadn't sensed him before and couldn't describe him because of the clothes Ryo was wearing. He said to himself, "This isn't the person I should tell about what happened to me." Then he introduced himself as Abel and told Ryo that he felt grateful to him for saving him. But Ryo told him that he hadn't done anything for him, that he had only brought him to his house and that he was the only one left alive among the soldiers. But Abel told him that they were smugglers and asked Ryo not to worry about them. However, Ryo was surprised that they were smugglers. Then Abel felt hungry, and Ryo offered to eat while they talked, saying that it was good for him. Ryo then introduced himself to Abel. Then they moved to the dining table, and Abel asked Ryo if he had any clothes. But Ryo didn't have any cloth or thread to make clothes, and he also couldn't sew. Abel asked Ryo if he could go buy some, but he didn't finish his question and said to himself that Ryo certainly couldn't do that because if he had money, he would have provided for himself the necessities. He felt he had insulted Ryo greatly, who had saved his life, but Ryo basically had no town nearby and no people either. Abel assumed that Ryo was the one who had caught the food and asked him if he used that knife too. But Ryo used the knife for 2 things, defending himself and cleaning the animals he hunted. But then he showed Abel that he could generate water and told him he was a water mage, which amazed Abel. Abel told him that only about half the population could do that, even in the central provinces, and even he couldn't use it. Ryo was surprised by the quantity, which was half, and remembered that the king had told him it was only 20%. Then Abel asked Ryo to take him to the coast because he wanted to check something. Then they started moving towards the coast, and while they were walking, Abel asked Ryo if he had any staff since he was a mage. But Ryo didn't have one. Abel said to himself that it was the second time he had slipped up, and he assumed that Ryo only had a staff and was living in this poverty. Then he asked Ryo to take the lead so that if something happened to them, he could act, and that he could stay in the back. But Ryo refused this, but Abel couldn't wait and went to the front to repay Ryo for saving him, and that he also didn't want his reputation to be tarnished for always being saved. Ryo then agreed, and told him that he would rely on him then. After that, they moved to the coast, and the bodies had disappeared. They began searching for them, and believed that the bodies had been eaten or washed away to sea. Abel expected that this would have happened to him if he hadn't been saved by Ryo. Ryo realized that Abel was lucky for this, but Abel will think about this matter. Then he asked Ryo not to treat him so politely because he didn't like being called sir by the man who saved him. But Ryo does this because he thought Abel was older than him, but Ryo saw that Abel was right, and that he would call him Abel only. Abel thanked Ryo and told him that he treats his friends like that, and that he prefers things this way too. Ryo was surprised because he described him as a friend, and looked up because he believed the angel's words to him. Then Abel finished searching the boat, but he didn't find what he was looking for. Ryo asked Abel what he would do now, but Abel wants to meet his friends and told him that the town of Leon would be a new beginning, but it seems that he drifted far away to the south. But Ryo is not sure of the location of this Leon, but he thought that reaching it requires a long journey to the north. Abel understood that he must prepare well. Then Abel asked Ryo about his opinion if he wanted to accompany him. Ryo was surprised by this. Abel saw that his request was sudden, and asked Ryo to think about it because he needed his help, and that he had no idea where he was, and didn't know the way to Leon, so he was in dire need of a guide. Ryo agreed, but he wants to prepare for the matter and asked him to move tomorrow, and that from tomorrow he will be a guide for him, which made Abel very happy, and he shook Ryo's hand. Then we moved to Ryo's house, and he said to himself, after arranging his life to be quiet, he will make it exciting now. Then he entered the house and told Abel that he was going to say goodbye to someone. Abel was surprised that he would say goodbye at this time, but Ryo only sees him at this time, and that he wants to tell him that he will be absent for some time. Abel asked Ryo to be careful. Abel expected that he was going to someone dear to him because he told him about the absence of anyone to live here. Then Ryo moved to the Fairy King and told him that he would be absent from the place for some time starting tomorrow, and thanked him for what he had provided him, and that he was able to stay alive thanks to him. Then he told him that this would be their last fight, so he would fight harder than usual. Then he attacked the Fairy King and dealt strong blows, and many blows between them were also very fast. After some time, the fight ended, but Ryo felt very exhausted. The Fairy King was about to leave, but Ryo thanked him before he disappeared. But the Fairy King showed him a large water ball and brought it closer to him, and inside it was a combat uniform, which made Ryo feel happy that this was for him. The Fairy King told him that he would wear it with pride. Then the Fairy King left. We moved to the next day, and Abel was waiting for Ryo until Ryo came out to him wearing the new uniform and told him that they had to set off now. After Ryo moved away from his house, he looked at it with longing, and then continued walking in the forest. While they were walking, they encountered a wild monster, and Abel asked Ryo to step aside, and he will take care of it. Then he drew his sword and attacked the monster, and dealt a blow to it that led to the elimination of the monster. Ryo was surprised by this, and that he used fighting skills. Ryo asked Abel about these skills, but Abel knows that magicians do not know fighting skills. Then he explained to him that it is similar to techniques used by swordsmen and others who fight with weapons. Ryo understood this. Then night fell upon them, and they slept in one of the trees. The next day, they continued moving until they reached a lake with lizardmen. Abel believed they were very strong in the river and difficult to defeat, so he asked Ryo to take another path through the forest. As they moved, Ryo sensed the lizardmen were coming towards them. He informed Abel, who felt he needed to prepare well. Ryo would also use his magic to fight because there were many of them. When Abel wanted to warn Ryo that he didn't have a staff to fight with, Ryo unleashed a barrage of ice arrows, killing the lizardmen. Abel then warned him about a large group coming. After they finished eliminating the lizardmen, Abel asked Ryo what kind of spell he had used. Ryo explained it was a water spell to use ice arrows, but Abel was astonished that Ryo could cast 4 arrows simultaneously. He thought the arrows were cast one at a time, not all at once like Ryo did. This was what he knew about wind mages, but Ryo thought it might be different with wind magic, while it was normal with water magic. Abel found it strange but didn't dwell on it, and asked Ryo to keep moving. However, Ryo showed him a cup of water because they needed to drink before moving on. Abel was surprised again, and asked Ryo if the spell he cast before was water creation, and why he had changed it now. This surprised Ryo, who told Abel he was just imagining things and walked away. After that, Abel used a coin to determine the direction of the path, and they headed towards Lon. Ryo was surprised because it was the first time he had seen a coin. Abel explained that this bronze florin was used in the kingdom of Nightly, where Lon was located. Ryo liked the name Nightly very much. Abel told him that in the central provinces, each region made its own coins, but they all used the same denominations. Ryo asked if the kingdom of Nightly was part of the central provinces. Abel told him it was one of 3 major states, the other 2 being the Dubohi state and the Handaleo Federation. Ryo was intrigued by the Dubohi state and asked Abel if he had a problem with it, but Ryo just didn't like the name. Abel thought that was what was bothering Ryo. As they moved into an open area with rocks, Abel deflected an attack of stones, splitting them in half. Ryo then created an ice barrier to defend as well, but they became surrounded by stones. Abel suspected they were in a golem nest. Abel asked Ryo to stay put while he dealt with those nearby. He launched an attack, striking the stone monster hard, but the monster was unaffected and its wound healed instantly. Abel saw no point in this, but Ryo wanted to try an attack. Ryo then created a 10-layered ice wall, which destroyed the stone monsters. Ryo thought kinetic weapons were very scary. Abel, very surprised, asked Ryo what that was. Ryo told him he would take care of 2 of the monsters and would use the same spell on the rest. They approached one of the monsters, but it didn't move and had a magic stone. Ryo said that was theirs now, spoils of war, and he wanted to collect them from the other stones as well, but that wasn't possible right now. Then they moved to another place where there was a huge hippopotamus. A group of wyverns were heading towards the hippopotamus, but the hippopotamus prepared well for the wyverns. The wyverns launched several attacks on the hippopotamus, but the hippopotamus released sound waves at them, killing them, which amazed Abel and Ryo. Ryo was very excited about this. Then night fell, and they lit a fire. Abel was amazed by the anti-magic spell the hippopotamus used, and he had heard about the Faxaf in the Demas having that effect. Ryo was very interested in the Demas and wanted to explore one, but Abel reassured him that he was lucky because there was a Demas in Lon in the central provinces. Ryo was annoyed that he had kept this from him, but that wasn't Abel's intention at all because he didn't know he was interested in the Demas. Ryo asked Abel if there was anything else he had forgotten to tell him. Abel said, "I assume you know about dwarves and elves, don't you?" But Ryo asked Abel to tell him the details. Abel explained that dwarves were skilled craftsmen and strong fighters, and there was a group of them in Lon, but there weren't many elves in Lon because they lived in the forest and didn't want to live outside of it. Ryo understood this and had always thought so as well. The next day, they put on the clothes of the beast they had hunted. Ryo said that after they crossed these mountains, they would reach the lands of humans, and Abel confirmed this. Ryo asked where he got this information. Ryo remembered his conversation with the dragon about another continent. The dragon had told him that the land was surrounded by the sea on the east, west, and south, and the north had a mountain range that separated it from the neighboring continent, so it was unlikely that they would encounter any humans coming from the south from their lands in the north. Then he came back to the present and told Abel that it was better not to know where he got his information, and that it might be knowledge beyond the limits of humans. Then they continued walking, but they heard a sound coming from the middle of the mountains. Then a monster bird appeared to them, and Abel felt very scared. But Ryo threw food to the monster, and Abel did the same, causing the monster to grab the food and fly away. Ryo was pleased that they had succeeded in this, and so was Abel. Then they continued moving, but Abel thought that the monster had left them with an unforgettable impression. Ryo thought they would have been in danger if they had fought it, but Abel thought that humans were not made to fight such monsters, and had not reported any encounters with behemoths and griffins for centuries, and he thought something was wrong in this place. But Ryo felt that Abel was hurting him with his words and thought that humans were the ones who didn't put in enough effort. But Abel wondered why put in enough effort for what. Then they became in the north, and Ryo thought the wyverns came from the north until they found some of them. But Abel didn't want this and wondered what they would do. But Ryo expected them to fight, but Abel saw that the wyverns were much stronger than them, and it was difficult to face them with the two of them only because hunting them required 10 very strong adventurers, and still suffered losses. But Ryo felt that they would face a good number of them, and may not be able to avoid fighting. Ryo asked if it wasn't easier to fight them while they were occupied on the ground. Abel thought so too, and that he would succeed in reaching it with his sword. Then Ryo advanced towards them to decide the matter, and Abel followed him. Then Ryo used the ice arrow spell. When the wyverns were hit by the ice arrows, Abel attacked immediately until other monsters appeared and attacked Abel, but he dodged their blows. Then Ryo shot arrows at them as well, and succeeded in hitting them. When they also fell, Ryo asked Abel to go and retrieve their magic stones. Abel thought it was very easy, but Ryo asked Abel if he was expecting a fateful battle in which his heart was racing. But Abel didn't want this at all and asked Ryo to continue with their plan because it was perfect. But Ryo didn't mind as long as Abel was happy with this. Then another group of wyverns appeared, heading towards them, but Abel wasn't afraid this time, and asked Ryo to eliminate this group as well. Ryo thought that Abel was addicted to battles, but Abel wasn't. But these monsters were blocking their path, and they would fight them now or later. He attacked, and Ryo followed him as well. After that, they continued walking until they felt happy because they had reached the place they wanted. Ryo and Abel kept going on their way toward the city of Lone. Ryo thought he was enjoying killing wyvern monsters, but Abel told him to quiet down. It'd be better if they didn't run into them, even though they'd collected a lot of stones like it was some unexpected reward. Then they stopped to check exactly where they were. Ryo hoped they weren't in Dubbed'anime, but Abel didn't think so. Since they were much further north than the kingdom, it wasn't likely at all, which made Ryo feel relieved. Abel was curious about Ryo's dislike for Dubbed'anime town, but Ryo said he had nothing against them. It's just their name that was a whole different story. Then Ryo pointed out a road running from east to west. He looked to the side, saw some mountains, and told them if they took that road it would lead to the town of Kalade. Ryo was happy there was a town nearby because he missed sleeping in a bed. Abel thought Ryo wanted to kill more wyverns, but Ryo said that was a different matter. They started walking again. Abel wanted some rest too, but he was also looking forward to the town's food because it was really delicious. They went to the tavern, and Abel asked Ryo to register with the Adventurers Guild because he could use the guild card as ID. With it, cities and countries alike would waive entry fees. When they got there, Abel vouched for him and paid the silver coins. Ryo thought, since Abel paid him a silver coin, he was now in Abel's service. But Abel wasn't that shameless and, in any case, Ryo forgot Abel was a respectable man who didn't try to get favors for every coin he spent. Ryo was very grateful, which made Abel find him a bit odd. Abel explained there were other reasons to visit the guild. They buy stones and monster parts for good prices, but you'd need to be an alchemist to benefit from that. Then the waitress brought their food, which surprised Ryo a lot. Abel asked if the food was delicious, right? Ryo was stunned to see curry and rice. He thought curry was something essential in stories about coming back to life and kept being amazed for a long while. Abel wondered what was going on and asked if something was wrong, but Ryo often talked to himself and told Abel not to worry. Abel asked him to start eating, and when Ryo tasted the curry, he really liked it and started eating fast. Abel told him if he wanted more he could order again. When Ryo finished his plate, he asked the waitress for another serving. Then Ryo asked Abel if they had curry like that in Lone City, and Abel said he could have it any time. There was plenty of it there. Abel was pleased that Ryo liked the curry. The next day, they kept walking together. Ryo told Abel he liked the curry a lot, which made Abel happy. But Ryo thought this was another secret Abel had kept from him. He asked if there was anything else important he hadn't mentioned. He told Abel he liked sweets, and asked him to reveal the best town for making sweets. Abel said he would think about it, and they continued walking. They lay on the ground, had some food, and then continued on. Loon City appeared before them, and Abel told Ryo this was the city surrounded by wheat fields. As they approached the city, the guard recognized Abel and was surprised to see him. Abel greeted him, and the guard thought he had been lost. Abel confirmed he had been but managed to return alive thanks to Ryo. The guard thanked Ryo for saving Abel and shook his hand firmly. Abel paid another coin to the guard to allow Ryo into the city and showed him his guild card. The guard welcomed Abel and asked if he was going directly to the guild. Ryo felt happy for Abel returning to his homeland again. They entered the city, and Abel decided to head to the guild to register Ryo. He told him that he would start at rank W when registering with the guild, but with the approval of a rank B adventurer or higher, he could start at rank E or D. Ryo thought Abel was higher than rank B and was very proud of this, but Abel wasn't confident about it. He told Ryo that as his rank increased, the level of missions he could accept would rise, and they would come with greater rewards. He recommended accepting them since Ryo would need money. Ryo asked if these things were that valuable, but Abel thought they were rarer than Ryo believed, and selling them all at once might cause the market price to collapse. However, he was confident the guild leader would find a solution for this matter. They reached the guild and entered. Everyone was amazed at Abel's arrival, and happiness spread among the adventurers. They approached him to welcome him warmly, showing he had great popularity. Ryo was surprised by this, but stepped aside so as not to block anyone's way. He walked alone until Abel was finished and met one of the girls who stared at him closely. She told him the outfit he was wearing belonged to one of the fairy kings and that it caught her attention when she saw him. She told him he must have earned its approval and thought he was an interesting person. Then she left because she had something to finish and hoped to meet him again. Abel came out of the guild looking for Ryo and asked him to come back inside. When Ryo entered the guild, Abel introduced him to the adventurers as the one who had saved his life and who would be registered in the guild as an adventurer. He asked them to take care of him. Ryo stepped forward to greet the adventurers, and they greeted him back, grateful that he had saved Abel from death, which made Ryo feel happy. Then they went up to the receptionist, and Abel asked her to register Ryo at rank D with his recommendation. The receptionist was surprised Abel was recommending someone Ninobody from the Scarlet Sword Squad had ever done that before. Still, Abel said he knew Ryo was strong, so the receptionist didn't mind approving it, though the process required some formal proof of physical strength. Abel hoped to discuss this with the guildmaster and also talk about other matters. The receptionist said she'd call the master, and asked them to wait in the waiting room. They went to the waiting room. The guildmaster came in soon after, very worried about Abel, and said he was glad he was okay. Abel apologized for making the master worry so much. The master almost had a heart attack after losing news of Abel. The master asked if this was the mage he'd heard about. Abel introduced Ryo to the master, saying Ryo saved his life. The master introduced himself to Ryo as Hugh, and thanked him for saving Abel. But Ryo said he hadn't done anything special, he was just in the right place at the right time. Abel asked the guildmaster to register Ryo and give him a rank promotion with his recommendation. Hugh had no objections at all, but wanted Ryo to provide proof. Abel told the master there was no need, hinting that Ryo was much stronger than he looked, which shocked Hugh. Abel showed him the stones they'd collected on the way here. Hugh guessed from the bright green color that they were wind element stones, and asked if they came from wyverns. When Abel confirmed this, Hugh was even more amazed, collecting that many would take a huge number of soldiers, maybe a whole army. Abel wasn't worried. They'd hunted those wyverns south of the Cursed Mountains. Hearing that, Hugh was shocked again. Ryo was also surprised those were the Cursed Mountains. Abel explained that after finding the road to Kalade, he realized where they'd been, and that they'd crossed those mountains. Ryo thought that name sounded ominous. Hugh said he'd heard that nobody passed through the Cursed Mountains and came out alive, and that normal people or even adventurers never went near them unless they had a really good reason. And now Abel and Ryo were telling him they'd crossed them? Abel asked if that was enough proof to raise Ryo's rank, and for Hugh, it was more than enough. Then they came to check on the rest of Abel's team. Abel thanked them for worrying about him. Then Hio said he would leave because Abel had a lot to talk about with his friends. He asked the employee to bring Ryo's registration papers to his office to finish them. When Ryo was about to leave, Abel stopped him and told him he'd wait for him in the reception area because there was something he wanted to show him. Then Ryo went with Hio to his office. Hio told him that these were Abel's friends, and they were the rest of the Crimson Sword team that Abel had joined, the most popular and talented team in town. Then Ryo entered the office and asked Hio if he had to register in rank D. But Hio knew very well how skilled Abel was, describing him as talented and knowing him well enough to realize he couldn't have killed Wyvern alone. This meant to him that Ryo was naturally gifted and qualified for rank D. When he tested him, he found that he was a mage with a good physical build. Then the employee Nina came to them with the registration tools. Hio asked Nina to explain to Ryo how the process works, while he would start handling the paperwork. Nina introduced herself to Ryo and welcomed him, and Ryo did the same. Nina began asking Ryo if he was from the magic category. When she learned that he was, she asked him about the type of magic element he used, and Ryo told her it was water. She asked him about where he lived, but she expected that he hadn't decided yet since Ryo had just arrived in town. Nina explained to him that he could stay in the guild housing for the next 300 days after his registration, and asked him to always remember this. Then she asked him if he had visited one of the Dimas before, but Ryo had never visited any of them. However, the guild offers an introductory course for exploring the Dimas every month, providing useful information for adventurers and advice for when inside the Dimas, which amazed Ryo and made him want to attend it badly. She told him that this course would start the day after tomorrow and registered him for it, asking him to attend at 9 o'clock. She told him about a clock in the town square through which he could keep track of time. Then she told him the interview was over. Then it was time for the actual registration, and she asked him to put his hands on this crystal. After he did, the registration was completed, and she showed him his card, telling him he was now officially registered. Then Nina left, but Hyo was very relieved because things had been gloomy when there was no news of Abel. It was good that he was back, and they owed Ryo for this, as he deserved credit for it. Now they needed to spread the news of Abel's return. Then Ryo went to Abel and asked him where they were going. Abel was going to withdraw his fees for accompanying him and wanted to buy new clothes and a staff for Ryo as soon as they got there. Ryo thought Abel was very generous, and asked him why the staff. Abel expected that since Ryo was a mage, he didn't carry a staff, but Ryo could use magic without a staff, and he fights with a sword if the combat is up close. Abel was surprised that Ryo could use a sword but didn't carry one. Ryo showed it to him, and Abel thought it was a knife, not a sword, and was very surprised. But Ryo wanted to ask Abel a question because he realized many things he didn't understand well. Abel asked what these things were. Then Ryo sat alone and discovered that clothes are measured in centimeters, a day is 24 hours, a week is 7 days, and a month is 30 days. Looking at this and the curry, it couldn't be a coincidence. Someone else must have moved here or been reborn in the past and had a big impact. Then Abel came to him, and Ryo thanked him for paying, but Abel was pleased that Ryo got what he needed. Ryo asked Abel if they would go somewhere else, and Abel told him that they should go to this place because he was their guest. Then they moved to the tavern and celebrated Abel's return, with Ryo also being credited for this. The next day, Ryo went with Nina, but he was very tired. Nina told him that everyone was grateful to him, but Ryo didn't mind this gratitude. Then they entered the guild, and Nina welcomed the new adventurers and told them that Ryo would join them in room number 15 starting today. Then Ryo greeted them, and one of the adventurers introduced himself as Nils, and this is Ito, and he shook hands with Ryo. Then Nina told them she would go to her office, and Ryo thanked her for guiding him to this place. When she left, Nils was very impressed with Nina, but Ito told him that he saw her for just 1 second, and that he knows reception staff have many admirers, and that he doesn't have any chance. But Nils knows this. Yet it's his right to dream of having a wonderful wife and being an important person. Then Ito didn't care about Nils' talk and welcomed Ryo, asking him to deal with them simply. Ryo had no objection, but Ito was happy about this and was worried about getting someone like Dan from the first room. Then Nina came to them again and told them about a new adventurer looking for a place to stay. Then he came to them and introduced himself as Amun. But Nils saw that Amun was very young and didn't seem to be of legal age. But Amun had just turned 16, and his whole family had died, so he decided to become an adventurer, which is why he came to this town. But Ito expected this to be the case for most people here. Then Nina told them that Amun would also attend the exploratory course for the Dimas tomorrow and could go with Ryo. Then Ryo came forward to welcome him. Then we moved to where Abel and his team are. Lin was angry about the decision to have Ryo join them. It's true that the ice wall is a type of water magic, but it's so thin that a wind sword can break it. And you're telling us his body is solid, which is impossible. But Abel told her that's what he did. Lin thought magic embodiment is only possible within a close range of the magic, and she told him he's not just talking about embodying a spell, but said he embodied it from a distance. Lin thought this was impossible, and that these are simple basics. But Ryo asked Lin to calm down, and told her that Abel told them what he saw. But Lin insisted that Ryo was not qualified to join them, and that what he did with the wyvern was just nonsense. Abel told her that her words were correct if he thought about it, but he was sure of what he saw. But Ryo thought the only person she had heard who was capable of doing this or something similar was the famous explosive flame mage. But Abel thought that the explosive flame mage is capable of burning 1,000 soldiers with one chant, turning a wyvern into ashes with one spell, and wiping a town off the face of the earth with one spell. All rumors, and the comparison is somewhat exaggerated. Ryo expected that if everything Abel said was true, then Ryo is truly an amazing person, and if he decided to be their enemy, they would die. Lin thought the worst possible scenario would be Ryo joining the Empire. Abel assured them that wouldn't happen, and Ryo was amazed by how confident he was. That confidence was all because of the dubbedAnime Empire's name, which surprised them all. Then we switched to Ryo and his new friends in their room, and they they were really happy. Ryo and his friends moved to the special class to learn the professional course on the basics of Dimas exploration. They would then go to a real Dimas, which made Eamon nervous about going to the Dimas. But Ryo told him they had a lot of time before going, and asked him not to be nervous so he wouldn't collapse by noon. Then the teacher told them that before he left, he would answer all their questions, and asked them if anyone wanted to ask. Then Ryo raised his hand and asked him if there was a way for instant travel to a level already cleared. The teacher was very impressed with Ryo's question. But there are some Dimas, but in the southern provinces, and this technique doesn't exist in any Dimas in Lon City. And he heard some rumors but couldn't confirm any of the details. Ryo understood the teacher's words and thanked him. Then Amon asked Ryo, what is instant travel? He was surprised by Ryo's knowledge of these things and wondered how he was only D rank, but Ryo had only heard about this information. Then they moved to the city's Dimas, located in the city center, and the number of monsters completely doubles every year, and they don't know why. Then they advanced inside the Dimas, and he told them that this wall was built to prevent monsters from entering the city. Ryo thought that the city's outer wall protected it from attackers from outside, and these inner walls protected it from the inner Dimas monsters. Amon saw that the great outbreak seemed to him like a disaster about to happen, but the teacher, to reassure Eamon, told him that this happens every few years and is likely to happen soon, so there's no need to worry. And he told them to notice the guild building near the gate, where the name of whoever enters the Dimas is usually registered at the time of entry, but since they were registered, they would enter directly. Then Ryo asked Amon to calm down a bit and asked him to take a deep breath. When Amon did that, he felt a slight improvement. Ryo asked him not to worry and that they were all there with him. Then they moved to the first stage, where there were no dangerous monsters, and they could explore the place on their own, but the teacher told them not to stray far from the Dimas gate. Then Ryo and Eamon moved together, then stopped, and Ryo thought something was in front of him. Eamon drew his sword, but Ryo located it and said it was directly in front of them but at a far distance. Then Ryo asked Amon to attack it after he had pinned it in place. Amon assured him he would do it. Then a soldier ant appeared to them, and it was one of the beginner monsters. Ryo saw that the easiest way to deal with it was to attack its neck. Amon got ready, and Ryo executed his plan, successfully pinning the ant, and asked Amon to attack it. Amon attacked and stabbed the ant, embedding the sword in its neck, which led to Ryo encouraging him. Amon felt happy because he succeeded in this. Ryo decided to take its magic stone and return because they couldn't forget the souvenir of their first hunt. Amon asked if this was allowed, but Ryo told him they were adventurers, and it was normal for them to earn their living from the Dimas. Then he showed the stone to Amon and told him it was a great souvenir, wasn't it? Eamon felt surprised by this. Then they moved to Ryo and Eamon's private residence, and they were celebrating Ryo and Eamon finishing their first mission in the Dimas. Nils drank his drink and wished it was wine, but Ito told him they didn't serve alcohol in this place and weren't allowed to bring it either. He thought that this way they were telling them that adventurers couldn't drink excessively, but Nils was celebrating and found no problem with that. Then Ito was impressed by Ryo and Eamon's bravery for killing their first soldier ant on their first visit to the Dimas. Eamon had eliminated it, but he did so after Ryo had pinned it. Ryo saw that Amon delivered a fatal blow to the ant skillfully, and there was no need for such modesty. But the most important thing for Nils was them getting the magic stone, and that was great too. Then Ito asked Ryo and Eamon what they would do tomorrow. Eamon thought about returning to the Dimas, but he was nervous about the idea of going alone and wasn't sure about this step. Ryo asked Amon if he wanted to go with him, even if he reached the third level. Amon was very happy and wanted this badly, but Ryo was still preoccupied with seeing the ant on the first level and that the lecture had suggested to them that this was unusual. Nils thought that the first level contained bats. Ito had heard reports about the appearance of soldier ants on the first and second levels during the past months, and Ryo asked himself why it was there. Then Abel appeared to them and told them that soldier ants could dig tunnels all the way to the first level, but Ryo told Abel that old adventurers shouldn't bother new adventurers. But Abel gave them the information to reassure them. He asked them, "Are you three Ryo's roommates?" He told them he was Abel, and that Ryo was strong but had some personality issues and asked them to take care of him. But Ito and Eamon remained surprised by Abel's presence. Then Nils stood up and introduced himself to Abel and told him he was his favorite hero and would be grateful if he shook his hand, and Abel didn't refuse and shook Nils's hand. He gave him advice not to overexert himself and to work hard, and he gave him the advice that staying alive is the most important thing for an adventurer. Then Nils assured him that he would strive reasonably. Then Ryo asked Abel what brought him to the guild at this time, but Abel told him that the mission they accepted took longer than they expected, so they just returned. Then the rest of Abel's team appeared, and Lin was angry about Abel being in Ryo's room. Then Rhea asked Abel to stop running away, and that they needed to report to the guild leader, but Abel was doing his duty by guiding the new generation. For the adventurers, then Lin asked Warren to deal with Abel. Then Warren stepped forward and carried Abel, which annoyed Abel, and he asked Ryo to deal with it. After that, Lin approached Ryo and looked at him a lot, and Ryo asked her if there was something wrong, until Rihanna called Lin to go, and Rhea apologized to Ryo because they took Abel, but they had to go to the guild leader to report to him, and Ryo expected this, Since he was their team leader, he must go, of course. But Abel saw Ryo as a trickster, like that. But Amon was surprised by what happened in front of him now. And Ito was surprised to see Rhea so much and that she resembled a real angel. And Nils was very impressed with Abel, but Ryo asked Nils what he liked about him like that. Then we move to Abel's team, who are on their way to the guild leader. And Lin shouldn't stare at Ryo like that, but Lin wonders if Ryo is a wizard, as they say. How could she not be interested in him? And Rhea thought she was right, but Abel assured them that they would see this with their own eyes, and they would learn of his power soon. The next day, Amon was in a hurry, but Ryo saw no need for this. Then they moved to the Aldemus gate to check in, and after entering Aldemus, 2 wolves attacked them, and Ryo succeeded in pinning one of them with ice arrows. But the other wolf attacked Amon, but Amon was ready for it and delivered a strong blow to it, and another wolf appeared that almost killed Amon, but the wolf received ice arrows in its body, which led to it being moved away from facing Amon. Then Amon managed to get the better of it, but Amon felt very tired afterwards. But Ryo approached him and told him he did a good job and extended his hand to shake it, and Amon shook his hand. Then after that, Ryo saw that Amon's sword use resembled Abel's, and that he had been training under a master in his village. And Amon confirmed this and told him that his master in the village was named Kiro, and that he learned in the royal capital. And he had his famous style in the Hume school, and this is the source of Amon's style. And Ryo believed that Amon, once he gets used to things, would become very strong. But Amon thought Ryo was a wizard but also proficient in sword use. But Ryo had a master he trained with for a while, and since his style was his own invention, he didn't think he could be described as proficient in sword use. Then he asked him if he had caught his breath, and Amon confirmed to him that he was fine, but Ryo asked Amon not to overexert himself, and he told him that his fighting style was very exhausting, but if he mastered it, it would prevent him from injury, and that it was a safe new style. And more important than this is raising his fitness. And he gave him advice to run as much as possible, and continuing that would be the path to improvement. Then he told him that he had traveled with Abel for quite some time, and he always started his day by training his fundamentals. And he might be talented in sword use, but even geniuses need hard work. But Amon got excited and said he would work hard like Abel, and Ryo saw that this was the spirit needed. The next day, Ryo did not go to Aldemas and had other plans. Then Ryo went to the library, and the employee directed him to the chemistry books section, and she advised him to start from here. Then Ryo gathered the books he would benefit from, but he didn't know where to start. Then he moved to sit alone outside, and while the sun was shining, something strange happened that covered the sunlight, which was an eclipse, which made Ryo very tense. Then Ryo received a powerful fire attack, but he managed to parry it. Then a girl appeared using firepower and approached him, and she said that a human was involved in the matter, but she would get rid of him. And Ryo asked himself if this was an Akuma. Then the girl showed fire, but Ryo prepared for it with magical reinforcement and showed many ice shards. And Ryo parried another fire attack from her, but she also used wind power, but Ryo also managed to parry it, which surprised the girl. Then the girl approached him and revealed her personal weapon and threatened him that she would eliminate him. Then she delivered a blow to him, but he parried it with his sword. But the girl did not give up and delivered several blows to him and almost hit him, but Ryo parried her attacks. Then the sunlight began to appear again. Then Ryo showed a set of ice arrows and threw them at the girl, but the girl was fast and escaped all the arrows, which surprised Ryo, and he believed she was using wind speed to enhance her movement. Then the girl flew high and attacked Ryo, but he parried her attack again until she moved away from him. Then the girl showed a fireball, but Ryo managed to overcome it before she could throw it at him, and he thought it was strange for this to come from her, but she didn't give up and attacked him again and delivered several blows to him. But Ryo was also in a defensive position, but Ryo showed a set of arrows and threw them at her, but the girl used firepower to parry them, and also used earth power and created a barrier, but she didn't succeed in avoiding the arrows and was wounded in her body, and Ryo thought this was the right time to attack, and he attacked and flew high to deliver a blow to her, but the girl was ready for him and parried his blow, but Ryo was surprised by the girl's wounds healing at a terrifying speed, and this distracted him, and the girl succeeded in pushing him away from her and making him crash into the building, and she showed a fireball, but she found a set of water balls falling on her, and when the first drop touched her, it caused her to get burned, which made the girl feel severe pain, and she used earth power to protect herself. Then the girl showed a huge amount of firepower, but the sun was about to show its light, and the girl hid her sword and told Ryo that time had run out for her, and this was something that bothered her, but she hadn't enjoyed a fight like this in a long time, and that it was truly enjoyable, and Ryo asked her to leave quickly now, but the girl thought he also enjoyed it, and that she wanted to continue the fun, and this secluded place was a special case where she had limited authority, and Ryo asked, "What is this seclusion?" Then the girl introduced herself to Ryo and said her name was Leonore, and she asked Ryo for his name, then Ryo told her his name, and he pronounced her name Akuma, which surprised Leonore that he knew who they were, and she should have gotten rid of him, but he wasn't one of those opponents who could be killed in a short amount of time. And when the sunlight was about to appear fully, she told him she wanted to meet him again, but Ryo didn't wish for this to happen. But Leonore told him that it was impossible for them not to meet again, and if not with her, then it would be with another Akuma. But she asked him not to let anyone else kill him but her, because his life was hers now. She would be stronger in their next meeting. Then she disappeared. And Ryo told himself that he had miraculously escaped, and if not for this uniform, there would have been a hole in his shoulder, and he was tired now and suffering from dizziness. Then Ryo went to the guild, and he had a bag of money with him, and he didn't think this money was available in his account, and that the guild leader replaced the wyvern stones very quickly, and that he didn't need to worry about money now or work hard anymore. Then he looked at his room and didn't find any of his roommates. Then he proceeded to go to the library to buy books, but he looked out the window and saw his roommates lying on the ground after being beaten by some other students. And Nils thought that if they weren't exhausted, they would have fought back too. But one of the bad students thought this threat was also empty. And Ito saw that this was a big talk from the person who ambushed them. But the bad guy asked them if the monsters in Aldemus would warn them before attacking them. But the bad guy's henchmen fell to the ground, and this was from Ryo delivering blows to them. And he told the bad guy that he was right, and he shouldn't have warned him before attacking him and his friends. Then Nils told Ryo that this villain was Dan from Room 1. And Ryo said he was Dan, and asked him what he wanted now. And he asked him if he was ready to drag the tales of disappointment after his comrade's defeat. But Dan got angry and attacked Ryo, but Ryo dodged the attack and delivered a blow to Dan, which made him fall to the ground. And Nils saw that Ryo hurt Dan badly, and Ryo thought his nerves were tense from the previous fight. Then Ryo showed a healing potion and started with Ito, because he's a priest, and they're including Amon in their training now, but Nils felt humiliated by that. And Ryo saw that they all needed some endurance, and he offered them to take a break together. Then they moved to bathe, and Ito cast a healing spell on Ryo, and he succeeded in healing Ryo from his pain, and Ryo felt happy about this, and confirmed that Ito was indeed a priest, and he thanked him, and Ito explained to Ryo that this blow didn't break bones, but it was really strong, and if it had been in his heart, it would have been a very serious injury, and Ryo told him that it was targeting his heart, but Ryo dodged this blow at the last moment, and it was good that he survived, and Nils asked Ryo, since he was very strong, yet he dodged the blow, and Amon asked, "Who exactly were you fighting with?" But Ryo told them, if he got the chance, he would tell them everything someday. Then he told himself that Leonore was an Akuma, and from her words, he thought there were many of them, and that he should discover this world.